Let's talk about that alliance. We touched on it during the paper section, but Paul Kelly described that alliance as the death of a once great Labor Party. Tony Abbott is even more incensed than that. Here he is.
I'm just extremely disappointed with Bob Brown because he is a man who has always stood for political integrity, and I think he has sided with a party that has not a shred of political integrity.
My knees aren't shaking.
Having said all of that, look, I understand that if you want to get legislation through the Parliament, you've got to talk to the people with the numbers, and so if I am in a position to form a government in a few days' time and I need to negotiate with the Greens, well, plainly we'll negotiate and we'll do it in good faith.
Right, so what's the difference, other than Labor has agreed up front to certain things?
The big thing that seems to be outraging the coalition is this weekly deal for a weekly sit-down with the PM. Joe Hockey in that same interview said that Bob Brown's going to be in Cabinet. Well, he's not going to be in Cabinet. He's going to have a weekly conversation.
He's going to have more access to the Prime Minister, I put it to you, than any junior minister in that government.
Let
alone the back then.
More access than any senior minister had to Kevin Rudd.
Yes,
more access than the head of Prime Minister in Cabinet had with Kevin Rudd.
But that was Kevin Rudd.
Yeah, but also a problem was that Kevin Rudd didn't talk to Bob Brown for 14 months, and we were slamming him for that. And so now we're meant to slam this other Prime Minister for having too much conversation. I think the independents will also be demanding regular access downs with the different ministers, and that's the way it has to be, because these people are going to be making decisions.
I think it's less important, the formal agreement, than the access. Because
I don't see a problem with the access.
No, I'm just suggesting. I'm just suggesting to you that I said less important, not unimportant, but less important in the sense that politics is all about the events as they proceed, and the access means that whatever's thrown up down the track, the Greens have the inside running, and the Prime Minister's ear. I mean, look, what if there's a double dip recession? Yeah, we need a new stimulus package. Bob Brown is going to be instrumental.
I don't get this at all. Of course, you'd want to have regular and good contact with the party that's going to decide what gets through the Senate, for instance.
Yeah, but do you need a weekly meeting?
Why not? And it is all with delegates, mind you. And I just don't get Paul Kelly's, the death of a once great party. I don't get it at all. What I think some commentators are having a lot of problems with is understanding that the Greens have, after all this time, finally broken through, and over 1 million Australians want them to be voted for them in the House of Reps. They want them to be there. They want them. This is a democratic process. It's now much more complicated than it was in the past, and we have all got to learn to live with and understand those complications. This is not an alliance between two parties. It's not a coalition.
I think it's less about the Greens breaking through as it's the splintering of the left vote in Australia now, and this is a formal recognition that the left of the Labor Party has gone to the Greens and they have to be brought back into the tent with a formal agreement.
They may never come back into the tent.
They may never come back into the tent.
Well, they're in the tent now, is my point.
It's not like the public didn't know that the Greens were likely to hold the balance of power in the Senate. I mean, we knew that. Everyone knew that all the way through, and they gave it to them in spades.
But now it's just as much about the House of Reps as it is about the Senate, because of the presence of Adam Bandt, and every vote now counts.
Look, if you go to the Greens website, I mean, it's quite...
Are they in Cabinet?
It's quite interesting looking at the Greens website, which I did this morning. I mean, they are fundamentally economically redistributive. There's no question about that. They want curbs on executive salaries. They're still opposed to the GST. I mean, you talk about atmospherics. I mean, this is going to be the parameters in which they discuss vital economic decisions.
But what matters really in the last couple of weeks is how modest their claims have been.
Yes, they have been. I agree with that.
On Julia Gillard.
That's why I say
some newspapers, and I would hesitate to mention any particular newspaper, but some newspapers have been talking as though Labor has capitulated to Greens on policy. And I can't see anything of any really controversial nature where Labor has given up its stand.
No, the fear is
one headline, for example, said
that play possum. Exactly right.
The one headline, I think it was Thursday or Friday, suggested that the Greens were now going to rush through the same-sex marriage claim.
How?
Well, I think that's what the story went on to say. How? And they also ran the suggestion that Steve Fielding was
but this is an unnamed,
bring the government
this
down.
is an unnamed newspaper, Barry.
Yes.
Yes.
That's just curious about one aspect of it too. They ran a poll, the results of a poll on Saturday on we're talking about individual seats, but countrywide. that more people were in favour of a minority Labor government than a minority coalition government. Now, Glenn, you've had some experience with this. They actually polled a week ago.
Yes.
And then published 6 days later.
Well, it's clear they didn't like the poll results. I mean, and the problem with the poll, this is News Poll on the Australian, is that it directly contradicted, at least in its thrust and direction, an earlier poll taken in the individual seats, which said they wanted them to go with the coalition.
But then you would get a different result countrywide to the individual seats.
Well, I don't think those polls actually mean very much at all, in the sense that, of course, most people are going to say go with the Labor because they've been in government. You know, it's the natural instinct.
They didn't say that on election day.
I don't think.
No, but they didn't say the reverse either.
No, you don't decide. You don't decide who governs the country on the basis of these polls. Who governs this country will be decided by the deals that are done on the floor of the House of Reps. Properly so. But it is interesting that at no point during the election campaign, at no point in the 9 or 10 months that he's been Leader of the Opposition, has Tony Abbott ever been preferred as Prime Minister. And this poll taken after the election once again reinforces the result that however indifferent the Australian people are either to the Labor or to the coalition, and we're split absolutely 50-50 there, the Australian people have on balance been quite clear for a long time that they would prefer, to have Tony Abbott.
David, I mean, Paul Keating never rated as preferred Prime Minister.
No, but we're not in a Paul Keating situation now. We're in a unique situation of completely 50-50. I say again, who governs the country is decided on the floor of the Reps, but it is interesting to observe that at no point in his career as Leader of the Opposition has Tony Abbott actually been the preferred choice as PM of the Australian people.
I think climate change has a lot to do with this. Even though it's not the issue it was in 2007, even though there's different views about an ETS, I think the fact that Tony Abbott, took a long time to actually finally declare that he acknowledges the climate, he was all over the place on it, and has ruled out ever a price on carbon, I think that doesn't play well for him in people's minds. Now, he's going to go overseas to international conferences not really supporting climate change.